Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Guess what? The band is back together and they're all here. Almost all of them. If you guys could, I'd love you to do this for me and just introduce yourselves.
All right. Thanks, Cole. My name's Walt Dorn, and I'm the director of Trolls Band Together.
All right. Hi, Cole. Good morning. Thanks again for doing this with us. I'm Tim Hikes, and I'm the co-director of Trolls Band Together.
I'm Colin Jack. I'm the head of story on Trolls Band Together.
Hi, Cole. I am Mark Scott. I am the visual effects supervisor for Trolls Band Together.
Greetings, Cole. My name is Benjamin Willis, and I'm head of character animation on Trolls Band Together.
What I love there is you all said hello to me.
Yeah, of course.
It was this great chime down. One person started it and it just kind of went down the line.
That happens every time.
Kind. It was just like, hello.
This crew is all about kindness. That's what you'll find out. Yeah.
Can you believe this is really happening?
We still got it.
Looks like your band days aren't behind you.
This isn't all of your first rodeos on Trolls. Not at all. This is like essentially getting a band back together.
It's kind of like the mafia. Once you're in the family, you never leave.
Well, it's, I've been on it for 10 years, like you too, Tim, right? I think a lot of us, this is like a decade of Trolls. But it is true, like we try to retain some of the crew we've had throughout all the films, but we also really want to bring in new talent and fresh voices, so we get that mix as far as the sequel goes.
It's weird when you think about it, because it's just kind of like, it's like the fickle finger of fate that like Trolls was like a thing that I would keep coming back to at the studio, because I would roll off of a Trolls movie or a Trolls project, and then I would go, okay, see you guys later, and then I would come back, and then eventually it was like, do you want to be head of story? And I was kind of like, what? But it was always like, to me, it's like coming home a little bit, like it's just, or like wearing a comfy sweater is what I likened it to, where it's just like, it's familiar, but always new, because every time you work on a Trolls movie, it's new. There's something different happening.
I think the Trolls universe has a very definitive aesthetic, let's just say. It has a certain style that's very different from other films. And so it's one of those films where we do try to bring back a lot of the crew who have helped define that look, because it is so different from the other films.
Yeah, and I think for me it's that I don't know, it's just the joy of working with the crew and working in this world. Like I love character is very important to me, especially in animation, and I just love the characters in these films, like especially Poppy and Branch. That they're the central figures, in this franchise, and I just love returning to it, and I love returning to that world, and kind of continuing to expand their relationships and seeing where their story goes, and because they feel very much real, to me, and I know to a lot of the filmmakers who work on this. Plus, I got promoted to soup on the first film, and then I'm head of animation on this one, so I'm really in it mainly for the career and the money. That's
well, thank God for that.
A couple of magical things, I think, about the Trolls, the projects, and one being just the world itself is such a fun sandbox to play in with everybody, where kind of anything can happen. So even though we're 3 movies and 2 holiday specials in, it doesn't feel like we're like scratching our heads trying to figure out, okay, like, what else could we possibly do in this world? It's like, oh, what else do we get to do in this world? Like it could be anything, it's so based outside of reality and in this sort of fantasy world where literally anything can happen, that I think that makes it a creatively exciting thing to come back to over and over again. And then the second magical thing, I think, like Ben was just saying, is getting to come back to this crew. The crew is just kind of like Walt was saying, everyone is so kind and so collaborative and so open to each other's input and ideas, and just pulling inspiration from each other. There's I guess kind of like an embarrassment of riches in a way, in terms of who we get to work with and the vibe that's present in the show at all times. So I think at least for me, I feel very lucky to have been a part of it for as long as I have, and hopefully we get to keep doing some more of these.
And also, I love that phrase, embarrassment of riches. It's literally a note I'd written down when I was looking through who I was going to be talking to today, because, across the kind of breadth of all of your careers, it's just phenomenal, the kind of work that all of you have really put in. And that shows in something like Trolls, because, like you were saying before, this is something that has a very specific feel to the world. It was very unique, signature, but at the same time, you're trying to keep it fresh, right? You're trying to bring in new ideas to this world to kind of keep it open. As you said, there's so many opportunities presenting itself, but, boy, you guys went in a wild direction this time. Let's talk a bit about that. You've got this arts and crafts of the Trolls, and then suddenly you've got this sheen, neon, glossy, noodly world of teenagers. If you could talk about developing that.
Yeah, it was really exciting opportunity to go, okay, how can we be cohesive to the visual signature of the Troll films, but where can we push and pull and push? So these new worlds gave us that opportunity. But there also was a narrative purpose, that we're trying to communicate something with the Mount Ragens and the world of teenagers and their values, as well as like the Vacay Islanders. So regardless of how wild and bonkers it gets, which it does, because we love that, I think there's always kind of a story or a narrative reason.
Yeah, just jumping off that, well, with a place like Mount Rageous, like you're saying, it's all this like neon, shiny, hard edge kind of thing. It's like we wanted to create an environment that felt completely, put the Trolls in a very fish out of water kind of environment that felt they had to walk this line between feeling dangerous to them, like they are tiny in this giant world, and it's totally opposite from anything that they've experienced before, but also still have kind of a fun quality to it, and so kids and whoever is experiencing the movie enjoys the time we have here, even though there is that danger. So it was a tricky line to walk, and we worked a lot with the art department, and they did such an amazing job taking all of those ideas and bringing this place that we kept referring to as a candy coated Blade Runner for our backstory, and I think they pulled it off.
And I think what's amazing as well is that, like, in the Trolls world, like the audience never gets to see all the ideas that we didn't get a chance to do, or that we left on the floor for, what I mean? Because either for time or for narrative purposes and that sort of thing. And just if you were to take a look at some of the storyboards that, people won't get to see, all the different ideas, even just for the Hustleverse and that sort of thing. I think, the Trolls world definitely has a style that is unique to it. It's identifiable, but there's still a lot of range, within that style, to explore and try new things and introduce new stuff. And I think that's probably what's most exciting, from a creative standpoint, to be able to work in this world or in this universe.
I think there's more textural quality on this film than maybe any other film we've done at DreamWorks. We've essentially our look development team, the texturing team, actually went through and created so many different materials. You mentioned like pool noodles, reflective gem stacks and metal, reflective metal, which is, like in a way totally opposite of the soft, fuzzy Trolls aesthetic. But we still had to express that as well. Because of all of the locations, some of them were Bergen locations, some of them were Trolls locations. So, and then there's Mount Rageous, which is meant to be completely otherworldly to the Trolls. So there's a ton of it that ends up being kind of all mashed together in a scene, and it works beautifully incorporated. So the tiny little Trolls do feel, as Tim said, out of place in this huge world.
The first film, you've got this beautiful story of someone finding their voice. Or the second film is, I've heard people call it akin to colonialism, and so we're talking about the themes of
That's
this.
what we're going for.
But let's talk about kind of, there has to be a story reason for everything, like you're talking about. So let's dig into that. I really want to know more about that.
When you make the sequel or the next film, you want it to have its own identity. I always use Alfonso Cuarón's Harry Potter as a good example, where there's a cohesiveness and an evolution to the characters, but there's also its own identity. So for this one, as opposed to last one, it was really kind of cultural, global kind of themes we were doing with. This one, we said, let's go inside. Let's go into the interior emotional architecture of the characters and what makes them, why are they the way they are? So I think that was a real intentional way to make this one a little bit different, to get really personal. Plus, we started making it at the beginning of the pandemic. So we were discovering our own emotional architecture. What makes us tick. So I
Which
think
one
that,
of you
that
is
kind of...
Justin Timberlake then? Yeah.
We're all a little bit Justin.
We are all Justin.
But that was pretty intentful. When you say, Tim, that was kind of the idea at the beginning.
Yeah, totally. I think both what you're talking about, kind of basing the story around the inner emotions of the characters is one facet of its own identity, and another one, the visual style, things like, we did bring in something that we hadn't incorporated in the previous Trolls films, which was sort of a handheld camera at moments to give, especially or specifically in the Velvet and Veneer scenes, to give it sort of this behind the music almost quality backstage when we're with them, and even a little bit at the beginning when the brothers are backstage and they're performing, trying to give it a feel of like, oh, we are kind of like, we get a privileged point of view with these characters that everyone else isn't getting to see. And then in the moments where we're, along for the journey and it's the musical performances, it's a little bit more kind of in line with what we did before in terms of the sort of more like, I guess, steady cam work or locked off shot kind of stuff. Anyway, visually, I think, and emotionally, we tried to give this one its own sort of separate identity from the other two.
And also pushing the scope, I think, too, is something that we did in this movie. I mean, I went and saw it in theater just because I've seen it a couple of times now, but I really wanted to see it with an audience, and I dragged my 16-year-old son with me.
You mean he happily went along with you, right, Colin?
What? No, he was just sort of like, the conversation was, I'm gonna go watch it. Do you want to come? He's like, is your name in this one? I'm like, yeah, but how big? I'm like, oh, it's pretty big. He's like, all right, come. But like the thing that what I thought was great, and it was like the Act 3 stuff, which was a thing that we iterated on a lot, especially the chase sequence of Velvet and Veneer, was how do we make this bigger and bigger and bigger? And then watching it I picked like a middle of the afternoon show because I knew there would be like the optimal number of kids and moms and like maybe some 20-year-olds. So I sat in this theater, and then when that shot happened, or one of these shots happened, like this one kid was like, oh my God. And it was just like, you did it. Because
you caused the child to wet his pants. Well done. The goal.
But it was like, it was something that Walt pushed for after like a few iterations, because we had like a concert, a thing, like Velvet Veneer had this concert on stage, and then they were sort of outed in front of the world. But the studio pushed us to try something more unique, and it was, I think Walt didn't stand up because we're all in pandemic, but said it should be some kind of Mad Max sort of chase through the city.
I think I said James Bond on mushrooms.
James Bond on mushrooms.
Kind of,
that sounds like Mad Max. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it all kind of culminated in this great thing where like we looked at that Act 3, and then we sort of throughout the movie tried to see if there was other ways we can push the size of the film, which I think we were pretty successful at.
Yeah, visually, it was a real challenge to try to incorporate all of that, but also you have to focus on the characters as well, because you're telling a compelling emotional journey, and there's many emotional moments, like for instance, when Viva and Poppy reunite in Rhonda as they're going to try to save Brozone, on the yacht, and that's a very emotional moment, but also played in the background is a giant complex render that took hours and hours to create. So, there's a lot of visual complexity, but you're trying to focus on to make sure that the character moments in the animation read over the top of an extremely wild variety of background moving images.
They sent me a screener to watch, but it was out in the theaters here. So I was like, I'm going to go see this as it's meant to be, not like pixelated, where I can't appreciate the work that you guys put in. And
Thank you for doing that, Cole. That's awesome.
And I paid for my ticket as well, so you're welcome.
Oh, great.
I've contributed to your...
Pushed it over the edge.
It pushed it over. if you're going to watch these films, the best way to do it is in the medium it's meant to be done. Of course, you can watch it at home and when it eventually comes out on home release. But if it's in the cinema, of course, I want to watch it. But I wasn't expecting that. And when you talk about that moment where the kid was like, "Oh my God," I know exactly what that moment was because I felt that as well in my heart. I was like, "Oh my God, this is fabulous." You know, when they're singing Fame and the trolls are there and everything, and you're just like, Jesus, this is so good. And it's something like very unique to Trolls is that the musical identity is right on the surface and part and parcel to do with the cast that you guys have. But that's something you guys really have to think about and balances because you've got these songs, which means you need these set pieces to go with it that have to be part of the story, right? So you've got a lot that needs to happen at each and everything. It needs its own identity.
Yeah, it's a complex process, just the construction of it. It's a lot of back and forth, a lot of dialogue with story, with our editor, Nick Fletcher, who's incredible. Like it'll start with, we have an idea for the cover songs and how we're going to do those medleys. And he'll just, like the board artist will draw, be inspired by the music. The editor will just kind of slam it together in this really messy way, different keys, different rhythms. Like if you would watch the original cut of that, you're just like, what is this? How do we make sense of it all? It's so bonkers and wild. And then
I see
that
where
goes
the hustle
to
dimension came from. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. It is. It's just such a complex part of the process. We have a great music producer along with Justin and Mike Elizondo, Joe Shirley. He'll kind of do a demo. He'll do all the vocals. That'll go back to story and then go back to editorial. It's definitely a very layered process.
I mean, some songs also just sort of like are selected like from the jump and they're kind of launched in story, like Crimp's moment, which was sort of like, again, it's one of those things, either was Walt or Tim was kind of like, we need a scene with Crimp and she needs to sing 9 to 5. And hear that and you're kind of like, okay. And then you cast it out and, you hope that it turns out as crazy as the pitch is for that. But then, I think, I can't remember who boarded it, but our board artist took it and ran with it. And then from there, it just sort of evolved. But like, sometimes you get, moments like that where it's just like, it's from boards to screen, it doesn't change very much. But then, yeah, Walt's right. Like it takes, it's a lot of back and forth of selecting the right song and setting the tone. Because like, sometimes tonally a scene works musically, but then we shift that sequence over and it doesn't quite work. So it's a lot of iteration.
Plus, it's a lot of our songs we like. Like I love Christopher Cross's Sailing. It's like the Mozart of yacht rock, I always say. Like it's one of my favorite songs. Like I'm going to put it in there. And 9 to 5 was another one. I love that song. So there is like definitely some fun kind of personal choices that go in as well.
And just as a last little thing on that point, we never build the story around the songs. It's always the other way. It's like we've got a story in place or we're working on the story and it's like, okay, we know that a song needs to go here. Let's start brainstorming what some of those song options could be. And we try a bunch of different things. And then we start to hone in on a tone that we like or a certain, a handful of songs that we think would make for a good medley. And the Universal film music team sends us lists of things that could be options. So it's this big collaboration, but it always is based on what feels right for this moment in the story and what could either help push us forward or, help us enjoy this moment in a special and unique way.
I think one of my favorite moments related to music in this film is the Velvet and Veneer music video. There's a moment where they're showing, kind of their fame, in a music video type, broadcast in an interview. And it was one of those amazing, like you were talking about the collaboration of the crew is one of those things where, it was supposed to be a music video. Then we decided, Ruben and the art team said maybe it should be like 80s music video inspired. And, my background initially came from the live action visual effects side. So I started doing a bunch of deep dive into, old video reference and scan lines and green screen, all that. We actually took the characters and render them over green screen and then did a green screen pull so they would have the harsh edges and all that. It got really detailed into it. And then we just started sending that back and forth to the group. Too much, not enough, et cetera, et cetera. And it just, it became this kind of very 80s music video inspired heyday MTV sort of music video, which, it's subtle, but it's fun for the, the fans who remember it.
And I think what's to echo off what the guys were saying, that that, from an animation perspective, there's a lot of dance and there's a lot of, physicality in the Trolls film, which is its own unique challenge. How do you make it feel good, feel like it's on rhythm, feel like it's believable, and they're actually doing some, proper dance moves, that the Trolls can do with their proportions. But a big part of it is making sure that we carry that narrative through the song, as well. Like that we see the characters, like Branch, seeing him kind of sort of reluctantly joining his brothers, which is probably my favorite moment in the whole film, when Branch kind of comes around and then he starts to dance with his brothers in that warm up on Vacay Island. I think, even though we've got these really great songs and this, really great recordings of it, that we need to make sure in animation that we're still carrying that narrative or carrying that emotional thread, through, that these songs are serving a purpose all the way back to the first Trolls film. There were, all these songs served a purpose, to further that story and to further our character's arc,
Really tough to do. And there's a ton of characters, guys. There's so many characters. I don't know what you were thinking. It's just like, let's add more characters. But it works. I mean, it works so well. What didn't make it into the film? I'm curious to know.
Yeah, if you watch it, you'd say everything went in it. Even with the movie as kind of, carnival-esque and wild as this movie is, there's still things that we, there are some limitations, I think, from a technical point of view, as Mark can talk to. And there's also just the need to tell a story that has clarity, But I'd say there wasn't much that we didn't do that we wanted. I think it just took us a long time to find what exactly those pieces are.
Colin, you could probably speak to something.
Oh yeah.
I could talk. These guys make fun of me because I did pitch. That question came up before, and I probably talked for 20 minutes about one sequence. So I'm going to keep this really brief. And I thought of like three sequences that were kind of like, oh right, we did that once. There was one time where we opened the movie with Velvet and Veneer and their origin story. I don't know if you guys remember that version. I think we all kind of. It was early days, but it was just sort of like them being struggling sort of pop stars and in some kind of like the dregs of Mount Rageous, and then them discovering Floyd and nabbing him. Like, that was kind of how we opened the movie, which was again that was really interesting and fun, and it was very like showing the sort of the villainy of our character, those two bad guys. And there was a scene where we have Bridget and Gristle go on their honeymoon, and we cut to the water park and them burning it down, basically with their passion. And then the third one, and there was a third one where Tiny Diamond says, "Am I the only one without a long lost sibling?" And we cut to Guy Diamond birthing Damien Diamond, which was like the nega version of Tiny Diamond. So we had like a Victorian outfit, and it was, like. All to say, like every sequence that I'm talking about right now is cutting away from our main characters, and that was the thing that would always die or leave, because it was just sort of like it was taking us away from Poppy and Branch. And if you're going to do that, you have to grab a really good narrative reason. And all three of those sequences, though entertaining, weren't good enough reasons to get away from our mains. So there, another 20, guys.
We also tried one moment where Tiny and Crimp fell in love on first sight, right, and had this big romantic sort of song medley together, and all of a sudden they were just like a couple. But that also, it just was a little bit of a detour that felt like at the end we didn't really need, but it was a funny idea in it.
On the technical side, I would say we definitely, I don't think we could have gotten anything more on screen. I'll just say that, because we barely made what we were able to get. We actually had to retool like the entire render farm to make sure that it supported a film of the scale, which we had never done before. But the one thing I will say from the technical side that did barely make it in was the city of Mount Rageous, which, due to our passion for filmmaking, we actually ended up creating a city that was so big it was unrenderable. Like, you couldn't actually calculate the size of Tiny Diamond within the vastness of the city due to like literally the state of computing at this point. So as we put Tiny Diamond into the scene for some of the chases, he was actually like resolving down to be a pixelated block. because the computer couldn't actually calculate the vastness of the city combined with Tiny Diamond. So I would say, at least for the chase, there was nothing more we could have done.
Yeah. Yeah, I echo you, Mark. Like, especially from an animation standpoint, I don't think there's too much more we could have done, either. I think we managed to fit everything in, and then especially later in the game when we had those special dance sequences at the end of the film, with NSYNC and the animation team. Like, you have to do your best to try to, like, well, you don't want to at the same time. You have to try your best to hold them back, because the animation, even if, regardless of the amount of time that they have on their plate or whatever, they just always want to do the biggest, best, most entertaining thing. And sometimes we had to be like, I mean, I don't think I ever told an animator not to, but I was like, it's up to you if you feel like you can, fit that in the time that you've got. But I'll never say no to a good idea or something that'll be fun and entertaining, and that's a big props to our crew with, because these films, they always have deadlines and they always have, there's only so much time in the day, but they never stopped from pushing things as far as they could and trying to come up with those extra fun, interesting ideas. And so, yeah, I don't, from an animation standpoint, I'm not sure we left much out.
It's like, Walt and Tim are really good at, like, creating a venue in which you can pitch and have these crazy ideas and moments. So, like, you always felt safe, like, when you came to them with something insane, like another troll being birthed out of Tiny Diamond's hair, that was but at least we tried. And, so it was always like they allowed it, and then it ultimately came down to, like, what made the most sense.
Yeah, I'll totally echo that. By the way, this is, I think, maybe my 50th film, and it isn't always like that. Like, the collaboration of being able to just grab, Gina or Tim and Walt and just get together in a room and say, here, I have a crazy idea. Or even one of the artists would pitch something in dailies, which we'd all never seen before. We'd run it back to him, and everybody would, get on a chat and start, geeking out on it. So it's not always like that. A lot of the times, as filmmakers, our job is to make sure we're following the direction, and so there's, kind of a fine line there. I don't think I've worked on a film with as much of I think, authority license to be able to pitch ideas and collaborate. Not all of it makes it in, but at least we have that opportunity to pitch ideas and to talk about it, which is that's a very unique thing.
Mark, I'm glad you mentioned Gina. Our producer Gina also gives us so much space to collaborate and to come up with ideas, and never just shuts things down because it seems like it can't happen. She always gives us that room to say, okay, let's see if we can make it happen. Let's try it. Let's see if it's right for the movie. And so we're lucky to be partnered with Gina Shea.
What a beautiful I was going to say indictment, but what's the positive word for that?
You could use indictment. I guess that's fine.
Yeah. No, but that's such a wonderful thing to say. And it is such a joy to have the freedom to experiment and autonomy over that as well. Like, they're so... I wouldn't say so rare, but it's rare and definitely precious when it happens. And it shows on screen. It definitely shows on screen. It just is this wild mayhem, but again, you're still able to focus on the true points of the story.
Thanks for having us, Cole. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, guys, and Trolls has always had a very special place in my heart. It's a real privilege to talk to each and every one of you here, because I admire and love your work. So
thank you.
Keep it up. Congratulations on your weekend, and can't wait to see the next one.
There we go. We better start rendering now.
Thanks so much. Always appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.